Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Samantha Winters, and I oversee our webinars and educational events here at Purview, and I will be hosting today's session. A few housekeeping notes before we dive in. Everyone's muted by default, but feel free to type in any questions into the Q&A box at any point. We'll do our best to address them as we're going through the presentation, but if not, we'll circle back at the end. I am going to launch a quick poll right now, so you should see that pop up. Just to help us to get to know you all better today. We're always trying to improve our outreach efforts, so if you just don't mind taking a moment to answer my questions, I'll forever be in your debt. Okay, so what we're all here to talk about today, some of the real challenges and issues that law firms and attorneys are dealing with, like how do you actually work with medical images during litigation? If you've ever dealt with an encrypted CD or CDs at all, you know, they're still out there in the world, or struggle to share files with your expert witnesses, you're not alone and you've come to the right place. That's what we're going to chat about. You've probably thought there's got to be a better way, and there is a better way. And Les Trackman is here to talk about that with us and walk us through those modern ways of dealing with medical images. Les is the managing director here at Purview, and in my opinion, one of the most versatile professionals I know. He's quite the background: serial entrepreneur, professor at Johns Hopkins, best-selling author, and also a trained attorney. So well suited to walk us through this. He's spent many years developing technologies to work for industries like this one. Welcome, Les.
Thanks, Samantha. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. You've had a busy traveling schedule this week, so.
It's been a busy 3 months traveling schedule. Yeah, I'm happy to be home.
Yeah, good. So my first question for you, really serious. I want to know the name of the law school course that you took for how to work medical imaging into evidence. They don't teach that in law school?
No, they don't.
I'm just kidding. So we hear all the time, what is DICOM? So that was my icebreaker to get us into DICOM imaging. If you don't mind just giving us a background, place to start as we get into this, because we'll be talking about DICOM and studies and, you know, how we work with those things.
Sure. We'll just spend a minute on this, make sure everybody gets up to speed. They're all at the same place when we use these acronyms like DICOM as we go forward. So first of all, DICOM is a format. That's what it is. It's a file format, a digital file format that virtually every medical image takes. So anything that you get off of an X-ray machine, off of a CT, off of an MR, off of an ultrasound, they all come in a format called DICOM. And it basically is simply a digital format that has information and pictures in it.
Great. So DICOM's the format, but then we also hear the term study all the time thrown around with medical imaging. Can you explain a little bit about what a study is?
Yeah, absolutely. So a study is the operative piece of a medical image, or it is the medical image itself. Basically, what a study is a patient gets a scan done on a particular modality, as we call it. So a CT. And over the period of whatever it is, 5 or 10 minutes that they're getting that scan done, a set of images are taken. And anybody that's ever had the opportunity, I'll use that word, that way, to get a CT scan, you've heard the ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. Those are basically all snapshots being taken. So those are the images that are being taken. If they stop and ask you to turn to your side, that means you've stopped one series and started another series. But that whole combination of images, which make up the first series or the second series or how many series you have, combined together are called a study. So a study might have thousands of images in it. It is considered a single study for DICOM purposes.
Okay. So a couple follow-up questions. Would you say that most legal cases have more than one study involved?
Yeah, typically they do. Depending upon what the issue is, something that occurred over time, there would be multiple studies, in fact, maybe lots of studies that maybe even compared over time, depending upon, again, what you're talking about here. So very, very likely that you'll get a batch of studies for a case. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about how we organize and save and even access the studies that we have.
Okay. One last question. If I'm an expert witness, do I prefer DICOM? Is that what I want to see?
You're an expert witness, you wouldn't be asking me that question. I'm just kidding. Yeah, if you're an expert witness, you're going to be a clinician, probably a doctor, maybe a very specialized doctor. And the strong likelihood is you want to see what you would normally see to do a diagnosis yourself. And that would be a study or set of studies.
Right. Great. Yeah. And we'll dive deeper into how that can work well for you. Okay. So what can go wrong? Right. We want to walk through some of the challenges before we get into the solutions when dealing with medical images and using them in evidence. And we have everything going on from CDs still being sometimes in the process from that to how do I open it? How do I view it? How do I share it? So if we could just walk through some of those. Are CDs still being used? Are you still hearing about them?
So the answer to that question is absolutely. In fact, it predominates in many cases. Certainly predominates how patients get their own images. They get them on CDs, and oftentimes, as an attorney, you'll get it from a patient, and the patient will mail you a CD, and you'll have to upload that yourself. So the answer is yes. But it's interesting you asked the question of what could go wrong. I feel like that's what they teach you in law school, right? They teach you to figure out all the things that can go wrong all the time. So very appropriate for this audience as we go forward with this. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So first off, everybody knows, whether you're a lawyer or you're somebody who just needs to aggregate records for other purposes, sometimes a subspecialist wants to do that. Getting medical records from where they are is a tedious and challenging process. There are lots of vendors out there, ROI vendors, other medical records collection agencies that are out there that lawyers use, or they do it themselves. And it takes time to get those records, and they're not always the right records, and it always takes longer than you'd like it to take to get there. If they come in the form of a CD or even electronic record, you have to figure out what to do with it then, and that's one of the things that we'll talk about as we go forward.
That's always the hard part, right? You get a CD, and then I don't have any computers that have a CD drive anymore. So I actually have some CDs that when my husband had his back surgery that they gave to him, and we just they're collecting dust in the corner. We've never been able to read them or do anything with them. So
it's interesting. I was at a major law firm in Houston during my travels this past week. And one of the things they said to me is, and we'll talk about our system in a second, but they love our system because it doesn't matter whether it's a Windows machine or a Mac. And that's one of the issues. A lot of times you'll get a CD and it will only have a viewer or a format that will run on a Windows machine, because that's the predominant type of machine that's out there. And if you've got an expert that happens to have a Mac, sorry, can't do. And you'll have to get a different disk, or you have to load them in a different way. And that's a pain in the neck.
Yeah, so, brings you back to the 90s in several ways, right? Okay.
It does.
Yeah. So let's say I have the DICOM file. It didn't come damaged. I didn't have to decrypt it, or I was able to figure that out. Whatever, I have it. So what are some issues that I can run into now with storage? I know that's another sticking point.
Yeah. So medical images are large. They take up a lot of space on your disk. And when you're storing them in-house on a disk drive, you have by definition, limited storage. And so over time, those will mount up and likely will overload, your word, what you've got in terms of capacity, and you'll have to add more storage. And then your machines won't be big enough for the more storage, so you'll have to get new machines. It's a pain in the neck to store DICOM files. They can be, as I said, they can be large, but large is multiple gigabytes of size, which may not sound large to you, but if you store enough of those, you're at terabytes. And when you're at terabytes, you're starting to
Mm-hmm.
most people's internal storage.
Right. And so can I just put it anywhere?
You can. You're welcome to do whatever you'd like with them, but typically you're going to store them in something called a PAX. A
Mm-hmm.
PAX is a purpose-built database, if you will, for DICOM, and it is the place where if you store them, you can actually view them. So it keeps them in full formatted form, and they're available. If you store them in a file format, so just copy the files, if you will, then to view them, you will have to reload them into something called the PAX at some point in the future, and then use a medical image viewer on that. We're going to talk about viewing in just a minute, but we'll show a little bit about viewing. And viewing is done in a PACS, PACS, which is a picture archive and communication system, another acronym for what we do with DICOM.
Yeah. Well, let's say I don't care about viewing, even though we know we do, or sharing, and I just want to store them in some online archive. Does HIPAA come into play? I'm an attorney. I have attorney-client privilege, right?
Shoebox is what I would suggest you store them in when you have CDs. Actually, a lot of people do, or the equivalent of a shoebox. It's interesting, and we try not to, try to scare attorneys into understanding this, but an attorney that's involved in a medical records litigation matter is in fact a business associate in terms of what HIPAA or high tech regards you as. So as a business associate, one, you should be signing a business associate agreement actually with your client, oddly enough, even though you have attorney-client privilege. And second, everything that you get in terms of PHI, private health information, you're responsible for keeping confidential and secure. And if you store it in a storage location, or even using a product that is not HIPAA compliant, potentially you're at risk for fines and even criminal action if you do it with callous disregard for the security and privacy of your clients.
Interesting. So say I've taken care of storage. Now I want to view it and share it. Suppose I don't have Purview Image. How are you seeing most attorneys do this without a system like Purview?
Yeah, so many attorneys use a desktop viewer of some sort, or if they're getting it on CDs, each disc comes with a very rudimentary viewer, and every one of them is different. So you have to get facile when using different commands to do different things, different views on the screen, and all of that. It's a little bit of a mess. And so having a system where you can load your DICOM and look at it the same way you look at it all the time is what most people would prefer to do. And some use a desktop viewer, some use Horos, which is an open source product that works on a Mac that we promote as well for other purposes. And that's pretty good, except when it comes to trying to share. And I know we're going to talk about sharing in just a minute.
Yeah. Well, can I email it to my expert witness?
Again, you can do whatever you'd like to do, Samantha, but you don't want to. So mailing it using your standard email is a de facto HIPAA violation because email that goes over the internet is not secure. And so if in fact something were to happen to that information, you would be liable for that. And that's not a good thing to do. Same thing with some of the this file sharing products that are out there, things like Box.net and Dropbox. There are versions that are claimed to be HIPAA compliant. Hard to believe how they would be. It does mean you need to get a BAA with that vendor in order to ensure that you're off the hook for that. Most of those vendors either won't give you a BAA or will make it really hard for you to get a BAA from them. And that is a signed business associate agreement because, in fact, they are your business associate when they provide you with software. So there's this whole chain of ownership that you have to get to and chain of, we'll call it security in the case of HIPAA, that you need to make sure that you're abiding by. So it's a tedious process, but you need to be aware of it.
Yeah. And even once you jump through all those hoops, you still don't have a way to view it unless you have something on your desktop, right? So there's a lot of challenges that you're navigating along the way. And if you email it, that's also assuming that the file size is small enough to email, right?
That is, and many email systems won't send a gigabyte file attachment or even a couple hundred megabyte file attachment. And the average in our world, the average DICOM study is more than 100 megabytes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about how to stop all this madness, how to streamline the process. That's what we're here for. We're going to talk a little bit about Purview Image, and we want to start with how can attorneys collect, so starting back at the beginning of the process, how can we collect medical imaging, whether it's from clients, a medical provider, medical records, what is it, medical records information request services, something like that, that work on behalf of the providers and send them out. How can we do that with Purview Image?
Yeah, so first off, we're talking about Purview Image because it's a cloud-based system, and it gets past a lot of the limitations that we just talked about for storage, for access, and for sharing. So first off, in a cloud-based system, typically you would have unlimited, or what we call virtual storage. So it doesn't matter how many studies you add, doesn't matter how big they are, that storage will be able to accommodate them. You'll never run into the figurative wall that will stop you from that. So that's job number one, is really do that. The second job is, okay, so how do you get them in there? Is it hard? Is it easy? And in a system that's done correctly, a cloud-based system, you should be able to receive DICOM files electronically, meaning you don't have to touch them manually. They'll just arrive in your system. That can be set up depending upon where they're coming from. You can also, if you get a CD, and what you're showing on the screen is a drag and drop. So if you get a CD, all you have to do is load that CD. Well, you have to find a machine with a CD drive. As you said before, most don't have it anymore. But if you've got one in your office, you pop the CD in, take the icon of the CD, whether it's a Windows machine, a Mac, or even Linux, and just drop it on the screen, and it will automatically load it into that cloud that we talked about before. So those are things that you want to make sure you've got. The third way, which is really useful, and I had this conversation when I was in Houston this week, is this is a medical malpractice defense firm that I was talking with. They happen to be a client of ours. And so I suggested to them that since the records that they need for their litigation typically are housed at their client's location, that it would probably be pretty easy to get them. And they said yes, but they use the same mechanisms to get them that they would use as if they were the plaintiff's attorney. And I said, well, what you might want to try is what we call an untethered uploader, which is a link that can be sent to that location. And then they can drag and drop, just like you're showing here on the screen, or they can receive an electronic file through there that can happen hands off, no manual process involved. And that's much more effective for the hundreds of files that these folks get every month.
Right. And when you say untethered uploader, for those that aren't familiar with that term, you mean that they don't need to have a login to the system. Is that right?
They don't need to have the software. All they need to have is basically it's a hot link, like you get like in an email where it says, press here to open this link. When they open the link, they'll get a downloader on their screen, and their screen will then act as if it were a screen that you're showing here. And yet they don't have to have the software. It just comes on their browser, and it is a completely secure link back to the cloud.
Awesome. Okay, let's jump to storage. So now I've received records, I've uploaded them. Can you talk a little bit about how we like to store records or imaging in our system and ways that it can be organized?
Yeah, so we just talked about getting them in, but of course, getting them into a system is only as valuable if you can get them out. Mm-hmm. And so you have to have them organized in some fashion. And what you're showing on the screen is a work list, very common in the DICOM world. For somebody that has a PACS, every PACS would have a work list. On your screen that you're showing, the left 2/3 of the screen are the DICOM descriptor. So basically says, here's what we got, a study of, the patient's name, sometimes the date of birth, oftentimes how many different images there are in that record. On the right-hand side, you've got all the icons of the functions that you can do in this case in the Purview Image system. But what's really important is, okay, getting these studies out. Now, a couple things that you should know about that. One is when you get studies from multiple locations, which most of you will do, oftentimes, and we ran into this also in my travels this week, often the patient's name is either spelled differently, has a middle initial in some, doesn't have a middle initial in others, all different types of things that could happen. That will cause you, for anybody that knows anything about digital databases, you'll know that those records don't match. Once there's one small bit of difference, literally a bit of difference, they don't match. And so for you to organize them so you can get at all of those, there's a lot of things you can do. One is you can edit the DICOM so that the name is correct. That's usually not a problem, although we'll talk a little bit about the evidentiary value of DICOM images in just a second. But in addition to that, you can tag the image, which is a non-DICOM notation that you put on there. And you can see it on the screen. In Purview Image, we now have a function that will allow you to tag on upload. So if you have a CD with 10 studies of a particular patient, when you're about to upload it, you can identify the tag, or in this case, the case number or the matter number, and put that right on the image. That will show up right on that work list. And anytime you need to get to all or any of the images or studies related to that particular case, all you have to do is say, show me the stuff for case number 95-10372, and they will all show up dutifully right on that screen. You also can, and we'll talk about sharing in a minute, but you can also share them by tag. So if you want to get all of them together and just say, share everything that's got this tag on it, that can happen as well. So getting them in is a challenge, but once you've got them in, you need to make sure that there's an easy way to find them, to identify them, and to get them back out again.
Right. And I like what you described, how you can group them together and share or be able to view them that way. Now, I think now would be a good time to talk a little bit about why we wouldn't just edit the DICOM. I know in the medical world, it's no big deal. If the patient's name is spelled differently, you can change it. But in the legal world, why wouldn't I just go ahead and edit that?
Yeah, so we're pretty sensitive to messing with evidence. So if ultimately, and most of these cases don't go to ultimately to trial, but if you do go to trial and you're going to offer DICOM into evidence, so you're going to offer study into evidence, you'd like not to have messed with it, not to have changed any part of it. And so, although in our system, you're actually not impacting the DICOM when you do it, it's still something that's a little bit questionable to do. So we prefer you use a tag rather than mess with the DICOM, change the evidence. I can tell you, though, that I've talked to lawyers a lot in the last couple of months about the problems that they have in terms of introducing a DICOM study as evidence. And most have said to me pretty emphatically that that typically is stipulated by both sides. So there's not an argument as to whether the DICOM can be admissible as evidence. It usually is led into the case. And then it's argument of what does the DICOM show that you get to, and that's where your expert witnesses come in.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, my last question on storage is it's in the cloud. So does that mean as I'm traveling, or if I work in multiple offices, or if I'm amidst settlement at like a third-party location or at court, can I access this?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of the cloud. So the beauty of the cloud is it's available to you wherever you are, and that's literally wherever you are. The only thing you need is an access point, which typically is just access to a browser. So it doesn't even have to be on your machine. It could be on your cell phone. It could be on a tablet. It could be on a computer that's somebody else's computer if you need it, or it could be on a public computer at a library, if you will. Obviously, it's PHI, so you want to be careful with it. In the case of a cloud system like ours, there's no PHI that actually comes to the endpoint, to the client that you're using, so you don't have to worry about leaving breadcrumbs or footprints on that computer with PHI on it. It doesn't come there. You're just looking at it. It's like Netflix. You're looking at an image that's located somewhere else. It's a streaming of an image that's somewhere else. But that is the beauty of this, which is it's available everywhere. No longer do you need to carry around your laptop or your luggable as we used to have.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue to viewing, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about, how you can view it right from whatever device that you happen to be on. So maybe walk us through a little bit. I know it's as simple as I click the eyeball icon and then I can view the medical image. And I do have this file open, so I can always pop and walk through that a little bit, but maybe give us an introduction to the viewer.
Yeah. So wait just a second on that. It might be valuable to see that in action in real life time. But basically, we talked about DICOM being a specialized format of a file, in order to view DICOM, you need a specialized viewer. You need a DICOM viewer. Our viewer happens to be a web-based viewer, which means that as soon as you click on that work list and say, hey, I want to see this, not only do you get that file, but you get the viewer right there on your screen. So you don't have to worry about loading it. And this is really valuable for your experts who are not necessarily computer savvy. They're medically trained, and they don't want to have any trouble accessing and viewing the study. So click on it. When they get it, immediately opens the viewer. And that's what you've got here. Viewers come in all different shapes and sizes. As we talked about, there's some rudimentary ones that are on the discs that you get. Every disc typically has a viewer on it. But if you have a single consistent viewer that you and your experts are using, you'll be in much better shape for that. And Samantha's demonstrating for you the power of this. So that's what she's showing you on the right-hand side, the colorful part of that, is a 3D reconstruction. So it's literally taking all of that stack of images that were taken in this is a CT, in that CT, and it's actually reconstructing them on the fly right on your computer screen as you look at it. Really, really valuable to the lawyers that I talk to in internal damages suit when there's something that went wrong with the surgery, for example. That's a great way of showing it. The other part of it is that if you and your expert actually have access to the same viewer, you can do it in synchronization. So you can both use the same viewer at the same time. And rather than having to drive to your expert and look over their shoulder, you can literally be working together on the same view. You'll see his or her cursor, he'll see your cursor, and he can or she can point out look over here, see what this is, and instruct the lawyer as to how they should consider presenting this when it comes time for a deposition or for the jury. And and that's an invaluable tool. That's one where when we demonstrate our software, everybody in the room goes, "Oh, that's really great," as it happened the other day. But that it is really valuable. We joke about when we talk about medical images. We joke and we say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? That's the old proverbial saying. DICOM is worth 1,000 pictures, so it's even more valuable than that. So it's a multiplier to the value of what you're showing. Beats the heck out of those old oak tag presentation boards that used to have the artist draw that you brought to the courtroom with you. Now you can actually bring live viewers.
Definitely. I agree. Every time we show that synchronous sharing and being able to, measure and annotate and export key images in real time, it's so valuable. I think you had a story of an attorney that used to have to drive to their expert witness and basically have the same experience, right?
They did. It was a prospect of mine that said, when I showed them the synchronous viewing, they said, wow, here's the way that we've been doing it. We could save all that time. And many times, a lot of the firms that I talk to, their expert witnesses are chosen by their specialty, not by their geography. So driving to it is not an option. So this is a perfect way to go about that.
Yeah. And in a separate webinar, we won't get into it today, but I know in a past webinar, we talked about how to use the viewer to present during trial, which can be really compelling. And so we can share resources on that after the webinar because we don't.
Yeah. And just if you go back to that slide just for 1 second, let me describe what's on the left, just so you know. That is what's called an MPR, a multi-planar reconstruction. So that, in fact, is all three planes of the body. It's the axial, sagittal, and coronal views. So that's top as if you've cut off the head, side as if you've cut the patient in half that way, and then front to back on the other. Those are what surgeons use and what your experts will use to identify specific locations of, let's say, a tumor or something like that. And they all work in synchronous. But so just so you're aware of that, MPR is what that's called.
That's why I like having you on here. I can never remember all those medical terms you throw out there. Okay. So I think that probably the biggest issue that I hear about, I don't know about you, or the biggest pain point is sharing with the expert witnesses. You get a case, you need to understand whether it has merit, need to be able to share it quickly. I think a lot of cases these days, you have to understand if they have merit earlier than you used to. So how are we securely sharing with the expert witness?
Yeah, so many states have that requirement that you actually have a bona fide case before you file it. Otherwise, you can get sanctions from the court. So a lot of the lawyers that we work with take their cases and immediately share them with an expert. Oftentimes, it's a an expert that they have a relationship with. So they do this often with them. And they want to know, first off, is there a case here or is there not, before they begin to pursue the litigation. But the way that it's shared is really simple. So if you look at that little curved arrow that Samantha has identified in the midst of that circle, if you clicked on that arrow, what that will do is that will immediately, we'll call it package up that particular study. And if there are multiple studies for that same patient, you can share them all at one time. And it sends a note, but not the PHR. It sends a note to the expert witness, and that expert witness then is asked to credential in to be able to see the study. And the reason they have to be credentialed in is because of HIPAA. So you can't just send a note that anybody could get, and if they happen to click on it, they could see the PHI, the private health information of that patient. That's not what you want to be able to do. So arguably the expert will have, through other means, other communication that you've given them, whether it's a phone call or another email that's separate or otherwise, have given the patient's name and date of birth. Probably not the best thing to do in email, but in some kind of a secure communication. So when the expert gets it, they have to type in, they click on the image, they have to type in the patient's name, because that's masked in the email that we send, and the patient's date of birth. And if they do that, then we will immediately expose to them, and that's what we do. It's really exposing to them that image in the viewer that we talked about before. So they don't have to worry about loading the viewer and all of that. They don't have to worry about, do they know the viewer that happens to be on that CD or what have you. They can load it right there on their screen, and they can do their review and their read and determine what they need to share back with you from doing that. So it's really simply done. That is the biggest issue that I run into when I talk to lawyers who use medical images for litigation, which is sharing with experts is a real pain in the neck. They do it in a lot of ways today. They do it by burning extra CDs. They do it with file share types of things, and none of them work as well as just click, view opens, there it is. No muss, no fuss.
Yeah, I've even heard of couriers still being used today, things like that. So it's as simple as I click the share button, I can shoot off an email to whoever I'm working with, expert witness, opposing or co-counsel, whoever. What if I'm creating an email? So I know the other way is to just put the link. How does that work? If I'm sending an email and I just want to put the link in there because maybe I have other stuff that I'm sending to my expert witness?
Yeah, same thing. It's just we can instead of doing the share email, we can generate that same command in a link, and that link can then be cut and pasted right into an email. Same thing. It'll be secure again. It'll ask for credentials on the other end, and it will open up the viewer the same way that the share will open it. So it's a good way to do it. We used to use that a lot when we wanted to send multiple studies at the same time, because our original software only allowed you to share a study at a time. But now, since you can share all of them related to a matter or all of them related to the same patient, we don't use it as much, but it's still there when you need it.
Yeah, I think it's convenient. I use it a decent amount, but I guess it depends on the circumstance, right? Okay, so this was a good background, easy, seamless way to be able to access, view from anywhere, and share with expert witnesses. Maybe while we're getting some questions in, you all can go ahead and start putting any questions in the Q&A box. Les, can you give us just some color on what you're hearing from legal teams already using Purview Image? You gave us a little bit of that, but is there some standout feedback or certain things that you feel like we've been able to resolve for our attorneys?
So I would start with who's got the problem in the law firm, which is always an interesting conundrum for me, because we're trying to expose this solution to as many lawyers as we can. And it turns out that the people that are charged with the care and feeding of the images, the managing of the medical images, are the ones who are reaching out to us typically and looking at these kind of solutions. So those are internal nurses who often get involved, mostly in bigger firms, but who often get involved in the care and feeding of the expert witnesses. So those are they, or it could be the paralegals who have to manage the transport of these medical records and images back and forth between attorneys, between co-counsel, and also to opposing counsel, because ultimately, if you're going to enter it into evidence, you're going to have to share it with opposing counsel. And how do you go about doing that? So what we have found is, although the lawyers are the recipients of we'll call it the benefits of this, the paralegals and the nurse practitioners that are in these offices are the ones who own this problem. And so listening to what they have to say is really important to us.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, we're already getting questions in, so let's go ahead and jump to those. The first one's from a spine surgeon who is saying they have the same problem in managing imaging between attorney firms. Do you have clients that are the expert witness? That's a great question, and we do. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
We do. So that's the reverse of the problem, right? So now you've got an expert witness that's trying to manage their attorneys. And as an expert witness, you own I need to see these images. And if there's a way to do that, that helps you do your job better, quicker, easier, you can help your attorney clients, if you will, with that. The way that that's done, and we have several of them, is the experts, so in this case, you as a spine surgeon, would actually license the software. And what you would do is you would say to your attorney clients, here's how you share them with me. Here's where you can store them. And you can filter them based upon whether it's, firm number 1, firm number 2, or firm number 3. So they can only get access to their own studies in your system. So it is a great way to go about it. We even have one expert witness company that basically farms out to multiple expert witnesses. They have a license to the software, and they cut it both ways. They do it both by providing separate access to specific expert witnesses or experts, medical experts, and then specific to the firms that they work with. So they work at almost like a many to one to many kind of relationship right inside of our software. So yeah, it absolutely can be done. It can be done securely, and it's a great service, I think, for expert witnesses or experts to use with the law firms. Makes you even stickier as a professional for them. Definitely.
And I have found that in talking with some of our attorney clients that, if you're a surgeon that's moonlighting, you just do this every once in a while, but you like something like Purview Image, they listen to their expert witnesses. So if you say, hey, I need something like this, and you recommend it to them, you can go that route as well.
We've had both. So we've actually had experts who have said to the law firm, you need to go license this. And we've had experts that have licensed it and then said to the law firm, you need to use this. So yeah, it does work both ways.
Okay, I have another question. Can I share a study with multiple experts at once?
So you can. When you share a study, you can actually concatenate the email addresses and send them all in one fell swoop. Now, you may or may not want to do that. So depending upon how you want to go about the process of who you expose these to, if you're shopping for an expert witness who happens to be able to describe the condition that you're looking at better than others, you may want to do it in a serial fashion, but absolutely, you can do it all at once if that's what you want to do, and then wait for them to get back to you with the answers of what they've reviewed.
Great. Okay, another one. If I'm working with my expert witnesses and they have an issue, can they reach out to you to resolve that issue?
So that's interesting. That's one of the things that differentiates us at Purview, is that our support team, which is very good, and I hear that all the time as I travel through the field and talk to customers, but we will support anybody that uses the software. So when you have an expert that you're engaging with your software to look at your studies for expert witness purposes, and they run into a trouble, they can call us and we'll support them in what they do. They don't need to have a license to our software to use it. They only need for you to have a license to the software, and we'll still support them. Every one of our screens, you can't see it right now, but every one of our screens has a little support button at the bottom where anybody that's using it can actually click that button, automatically send an email to our support team, or you can call our 800 number, where the folks there will likely answer the phone and also likely be able to answer your question.
Yeah. Okay. And this one comes up a lot. It is, can I integrate with my case management software? I know we hear that a lot, but yeah, what's your answer to that?
So the first question I ask is, do you want to? And I just need to know the rationale for that. Most case management systems don't store DICOM. So they don't have a facility to store DICOM. We can create a link, an HL7 link or an API link, and that may be beyond your technical capabilities to understand that. But just note that we can create customized links to file management systems or case management systems and enable you to, within the case, press a button and see a list of all the DICOM that's associated with that. That DICOM will still be stored in our system, it'll still be viewed in our system, but it'll appear that it's accessible right to the file management system. So that can be done. But one of the questions I always ask is when you have a file management system and you're using it for medical purposes or medical litigation purposes, do you have a BAA with that vendor? You need to make sure you get one, because even if you're storing just medical records, just paper records that have been scanned, faxed, or electronically sorted into that system, that's PHI. And if it's stored in the cloud, which often these file management systems are, that vendor has access to that information. And so you need to have a BAA with them in order to ensure, even if they say it's HIPAA compliant, get that BAA, because that ensures that you're off the hook if something goes wrong.
That's great. I appreciate that. Okay. We have some other questions, but I think you covered them earlier, so we can reach out if any others come in. We're over that hour. So I will go ahead and wrap it up at this point, unless you have anything else that you want to add, Les.
The only thing I would add is I'm enthused, but I'm amazed when I talk to law firms, one, at how aggressively they're using medical images today compared to what they were doing 6 months or a year ago. And then second, how valuable it is for them in terms of saving time, access, availability, and pleasing their expert witnesses in using a system like ours. I would think that it was effectively a no-brainer, and it often is, but first we have to meet the firm and show it to them, and then it becomes a no-brainer. The other piece that I've found is they use it more and more and more. Once they get it in the system, they go, wow, this is great. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. And so the system usage becomes expands across the firm, and that just does my heart good, because this is what we built this for, is for use for things like this.
Exactly. There's one more question I maybe could answer quickly, and that is just on the pricing.
Yeah. So the pricing of our system is based upon the volume of studies that you put into the system. So we try to price it for every size firm. So from the smallest firm, the price is just under $300 a month, to the largest firms, which the pricing is somewhere in about I don't have it in front of me, but about $1,200 a month. So depending upon how big or how much use you have the system, that's typically based upon the volume of studies that you enter into the system, not the number of people using it. That's what your pricing will range for. But a lot of the firms that we work with start with the what we call the starter version, and then they grow from there.
Yeah, and all of the pricing's online. We will include that in the follow-up email, or a link to go to our website where you can view that. But all transparent, you can just view it right online. So wonderful. So thank you so much for walking us through the more seamless way of doing things, much less clunky process, right? From to be able to get rid of CDs, to be able to easily share with expert witnesses. And thank you to everyone that joined us today. If you want to see how this can work for you, feel free to book a demo with our team, and we're happy to walk you through it in a more in-depth way and talk about your unique needs throughout that process. We also just came out with a 5-minute demo that we're really excited to share with the world. So we'll go ahead and share that as well. Then we have other resources we're continuously putting out. We've talked about how to use medical imaging at trial. So we'll have more webinars that come out. We have some guides for law firms and white papers that we will absolutely put out and share with the team, along with the recording of this session. So thanks again for joining, and enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Les.
Thanks, Samantha.